Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story of, What If Naruto Had Temari as his personal maid? Part 2. But before we start, please support for more amazing content. And consider subscribing to my channel, share this video with your friends, and now let's start the video. Of dreams and nightmares, what are you doing here? A boy with golden hair and pure sky blue eyes said as he sat alone in the dark on a swing dressed in a simple white shirt and a pair of blue baggy shorts. I don't know. Where am I? He doesn't like it when other people come near me, you know. He said and wrapped his short chubby arm around one of the ropes of the swing. Who's he? The boy looked down at his bare feet and started sniffling, desperate to hold his tears back. No one likes me because of him. They think I'm a demon. But one day they'll like me for who I am and won't hate me anymore because of him. Please, tell me where I am. Can you keep a secret? The boy said as he once again ignored the question. A long time ago a strong man sealed him inside me. He then lifted up his shirt, revealing a horrible mix of markings carved into the skin of his tiny belly. Why would he do that to you? You're a pretty girl. Will you be my friend? The boy said and then suddenly winced. The carved markings started to ooze deep red blood. Oh no, he knows you're here. You have to go. The dark space suddenly pulsated with an eerie red like a sickening heartbeat. A horrible and evil rumbling laughter could be heard as a pair of glowy, demonic eyes pierced the darkness and slowly came closer and closer to the boy. Go now, the little boy yelled. Ah! Temari woke up with a gasp and discovered she was drenched in cold sweat, making her night shirt cling to her frame. What the hell was that? She thought and sat up, her hand clutching her forehead. Never in her whole life had she been as scared as in that dream. Not even her days with Gaara when he was still evil and uncaring came close. She didn't know exactly why, but the dream had exhausted her. So when she lied back down she immediately drifted off to sleep. His time without it being disturbed by dreams or nightmares. Temari wouldn't remember the dream she had the night before when she awoke again. Naruto was floating on air the next morning when he recalled the events that took place yesterday. All his friends came to see him on his birthday. He had received great gifts and of course, Temari-chan, with a full-fledged grin appearing on his face. He quickly got up from his futon and got dressed. Foregoing his usual orange outfit, he decided he'd try on some of the clothes he had received yesterday. He picked out a black shirt, dark gray khakis, the pair of heavy army boots and the very good-looking black jacket he had gotten from Tsunade. With his grin dying down to a sweet smile, he picked up the necklace the older woman had given him after the fight with Orochimaru and clasped it around his neck. Grabbing his head protector from his desk before he ran out of the room to go downstairs, he tied it around his neck as well. Without the protector holding up his hair, it dropped down into spiky bangs that nearly fell into his eyes. With his usual energy, Naruto barged down the stairs loudly, and it had become a daily routine for Kankuro to appear from his room to start shouting at Naruto for being so noisy and of course shouting the usual threats of dismemberment and painful deaths. Therefore, the blonde boy was slightly surprised when there came none. Now on the ground floor he walked across the hallway and pushed open the kitchen door, revealing Temari humming a tune he had never heard before. Naruto was still very happy but also very nervous. This girl had kissed him the night before, so he didn't really quite know what to do. I'd better ask Oba-chan about it later. There's no way I'm going to ask that open pervert, he thought. Naruto wasn't the only one who was nervous. With her brothers gone to meet with the other Sand teams, Temari would be alone with Naruto after the morning she had kissed him. Finishing putting a couple of fried eggs on 2 plates, she turned around and nearly dropped the plates she was holding in surprise. In front of her stood a blonde boy with a sweet smile she had never seen before. His clothes were also very different. Gone was the childish orange jumpsuit, and here he was, standing in new clothes that made him seem older somehow. Good morning, Temari-chan, Naruto said and rubbed his hands nervously. Was he doing the right thing in adding "chan"? And why was she staring at him like that? Oh no, did I do something wrong? He thought, mortified. His smile faltered slightly, as he sat down on one of the chairs around the kitchen table. Snapping out of her trance, Temari quickly recovered and put on a smile of her own. Good morning, Naruto-kun. I made some sushi for breakfast, I hope you don't mind. She said and put a plate in front of him and proceeded to sit on the chair across him. And no, not at all. The blonde boy said and grabbed his chopsticks. In the week he had already spent in the house, Naruto had learned the common courtesy to wait with eating until the other people at the table were ready. Although the feared spatula Temari usually brandished when she was cooking might have had something to do with it. So they started at the same time. Both of them chuckled slightly when it happened, but Naruto motioned for Temari to start first. Naruto-kun, about last night, Temari said softly as she lowered her eyelashes slightly to look down at her plate. Naruto paled. I haven't done anything wrong, have I? He said with fear apparent in his voice. No, that's not it. It's just that I haven't kissed a boy before. Temari quickly said. In the sand village no boy ever got close to her in fear of getting brutally slaughtered by Gaara. Me neither. I've never kissed someone before, that is he. Naruto said and started fiddling with his fingers. Temari took a deep breath. Seeing that she was 15, she probably knew a bit more about this whole romance thing than Naruto did, she just had to get this off her chest. The girl was starting to develop feelings for the blonde boy ever since he caused Gaara to be nicer, and having kissed him the night before affirmed her beliefs that she really liked Naruto. And now that he sat here in front of her in new clothes that made him look a bit older than he really was. Not to mention a lot more handsome. She added in her thoughts with a slight blush. Well, I thought that kiss was really nice. Visible relief was showing on Naruto's face. Yeah, it was. It was great. You guys have done so much for me already and I never expected you to kiss me yesterday. He said, slightly breathless. We have to do it again sometime soon. The blonde boy added. Then realizing exactly what he said, he covered his eyes and blushed furiously. If you want to. He finished softly and decided he should shut up before he embarrassed himself further. Temari put a hand on her lips and giggled. She was glad he liked it. But didn't that make them boyfriend and girlfriend now? She thought it best to ask. Yes, Naruto-kun, I'd like that. But doesn't that make us? She paused here for a moment. Boyfriend and girlfriend. The hyperactive shinobi couldn't believe his ears. His whole life everyone had shunned him and treated him like dirt. Except the few people that acknowledged him. And now this very pretty girl wanted to be his girlfriend. Now he definitely had to go see Tsunade about this. I think so. I'd really like to. He said and peeked through his fingers at the girl opposite him. Just when the previous session of blushing had faded, her cheeks now positively burned. Temari nodded energetically. Me too. Anyway, let's eat our breakfast. That said, they both focused on their food and tried squashing the giddy feeling that threatened to burst forth from their stomachs. When they had finished, Temari mumbled something about going to find her brothers and jumped up from her seat. She dashed over to Naruto and pecked him on the cheek quickly, and with the burning red still staining her face, BBED her fan from the living room before running out the front door as quickly as she could. Naruto sat silently for a moment and touched his cheek softly with his hand. He then stood up to clean up the table and washed the plates and pans that were used this morning. Unable to control the wave of emotions in his body any longer, he stood still a moment before a loud shout echoed throughout the entire house. Woohoo! As she was walking towards the training field where she would begin her daily training routine with Lee, Sakura couldn't help but feel ashamed of herself. 3 days ago, Ino had asked her if she wanted to come to Naruto's birthday party they arranged yesterday. She declined and had to endure a whole hour of questioning before Ino backed off and left her alone. Sakura knew exactly why she had declined. She couldn't face him yet. After training a whole week with Lee and not thinking about Sasuke anymore, she realized just how much of a jerk she had been to her teammate Naruto. If there still is a Team 7, that is, she thought bitterly. The pink-haired Kunoichi still had to thank him, she just didn't know how to tell him that though. Thanks for bringing him back. But I'm over him, so it doesn't really matter anymore. Forcefully stopping this train of thought, she figured she would think about it later and would focus on the training today. When she arrived at Training Field 4, she saw Lee already going at it with the large training logs in the center of the field. Wow, Lee-kun is really dedicated. she thought and smiled. Good morning, Lee-kun, she yelled as she cupped her hands in front of her mouth for effect. Lee stopped punching and kicking the log and looked at Sakura. Hey, Sakura-chan, you're a bit late, he said with a small smile. Why? Oh, you know I don't wake up properly until a few hours after I get out of bed, Lee-kun, she whined and took off her jacket. She would get warmer due to the exercises in the rapidly cooling air as winter drew ever closer. A comfortable ritual had been developed between the two of them. Lee didn't drool over the love of his life anymore, and Sakura didn't try to beat him to a pulp when he suggested outrageous numbers of exercises. It's time to add more weights, Sakura-chan, Lee said and grabbed a few metal bars out of the bag he dragged out to the field every morning. He had explained to Sakura at every week from the moment they had started, that he would increase the weights by 5 kilograms to Sakura's wrist and ankle bands. He also decided that Sakura should focus more on daring acrobacy, CS to avoid damage from enemies instead of speed and taking blows like he did himself. Therefore it came as no surprise to Sakura that he ordered her to do 50 back flips after the usual sit-ups and push-ups from a standing still position, and then he would throw small marbles for her to dodge. Sakura was halfway through the back flips when a cold voice stopped her in her tracks. What is Sakura doing here? Thick brows. Ah, good morning, Naruto-kun, Lee said cheerily as he looked up at the blonde boy from the log he was kicking just now. Sakura-chan asked me to train her so she could become stronger. Whatever. What did you want? Well, I'm sorry I couldn't make it yesterday, said Lee as he rummaged through his bag and pulled out a somewhat large pouch. Happy birthday, Naruto-kun. They're wrist and ankle bands to put weights in. I've put some metal bars in there as well for you to put in, he added and threw the pouch to the blonde boy. Naruto oofed when he caught it and nearly fell down on his behind due to the weight. Thanks, Lee-san, but shit, how much do these things weigh? Only 25 kilograms each, so in total 100 kilograms. Lee explained. When you've gotten used to them you can give them back to me and I'll give you heavier ones. Sakura watched the exchange with slight disbelief. Not that Naruto was beginning with heavier weights than her, but it was the outfit he wore. Wow, was the only thing she could think of. Finally regaining her senses, she figured she'd better congratulate him but stopped when he glared at her. Kak, Ashi-sensei wants us to meet on the bridge at 1 p.m., Sakura. He sneered. Be there or not, I don't care. Bye, Lee-san, and thanks again for the gift, I appreciate it. It's sure to help me in my training. With that said, he turned around and walked away. Noticing the lack of the chan he normally added to her name, Sakura slightly panicked, that is until Lee asked her if anything happened between the two of them. She shook her head and said that they should get back to their training. Why wouldn't she leave him the hell alone? He only asked her to visit Choji with him once. Girls were nothing but troublesome things to him. He should have told her that he wanted to go alone today. But at least she was useful as a mule to carry all the bags of chips and other snacks to the room Choji used to share with Neji. But she just had to walk back with him when they left again. When he sighed softly at that, he received a sharp poke to the head. What is it now, Shika-kun? What the? Shika-kun. My name is Shikamaru, woman. Shikamaru thought angrily but wasn't up to voicing his thoughts, so he muttered a soft nothing instead. Ino, however, looked at him shrewdly. Yeah, right. Just drop it already, it's way too troublesome, he said lazily and closed his eyes. Shikamaru was glad when he could finally drop her off at the flower shop Ino's family owned. After a quick goodbye, he strolled at a leisurely pace to his usual spot to lie down and look at the clouds. Women are way too troublesome, was his final thought before he let his mind go blissfully blank as it tried to discern different shapes the clouds were today. Do you always make them wait this long, Kakashi-sensei? A white-haired girl with silver eyes asked as she stood by her new sensei and temporary roommate. Usually, the Junin answered. Why? The girl asked again. It allows me to see if there are any problems in the team and I can deal with it better after I've analyzed it. But mostly it's because it's fun, Kakashi said as he looked at two figures standing with their backs to each other on a large wooden bridge. Well, we've made them wait long enough, let's go and introduce you to them. The Girl just nodded and disappeared with her sensei only to reappear seconds later next to the two figures. Naruto was royally pissed off. It was bad enough that Sakura didn't show up at his party or congratulate him this morning when he told her to come here on the bridge. But now the happy state of mind with which he had left his house this morning disappeared even further as he was forced to wait here in very uncomfortable silence with the girl as their sensei was late as usual. He would definitely give him a piece of his mind when he would finally show up. Yo, there it was. That annoying. Yo, you're late you bastard, Naruto yelled as he glared at his silver-haired sensei. He was so caught up in his rage he didn't notice the girl standing next to Kakashi and the shocked look Sakura gave him. Show up on time for once, damn it. Kakashi, seemingly unfazed by the sudden outburst of his student, coughed. Sorry, there was a cat that was about to deliver a litter of kittens. I had to help. Aargh. Naruto shouted and flailed his arms widely in frustration. Stop making stupid excuses. Anyway, the silver-haired Junin continued as if nothing happened. Sakura, Naruto, I want you to meet your new teammate. What about Sasuke? Sakura asked in slight alarm. Figures. She would only think about that idiot. Naruto thought bitterly as his anger died down slightly and glared at his former crush. He has been dismissed from shinobi duties for the time being for reasons I'm sure you two are aware of. Kakashi said and pushed the girl standing next to him forward. Hello. My name is Mikazuki Kumiko. The girl said as she introduced herself with a low bow. Kumiko wore a black tank top and a stylish light blue jacket that was zipped open in the front. And had a white half-moon symbol on the back. She wore standard black open-toed shinobi sandals and a pair of tight-fitting light blue pants that came down to just below the knees which showed her bandaged lower legs. Her whole left arm and hand was also bandaged and her right hand was in a fingerless glove. She focused her silvery eyes on Naruto and Sakura for a few moments before she started apping her long smooth white hair around her left index finger nervously. Hey, at least she's way better looking than that bastard, Sasuke. Naruto thought and grinned. He walked up to the girl and held out his hand for her to shake. My name is Uzumaki Naruto and I'll be the next Hokage one day, so don't you forget it. Kumiko shook the blonde boy's hand eagerly. Pleased to meet you, she said and beamed at him. Sakura also stepped towards the new girl and bowed. My name is Haruno Sakura. I hope we'll become good friends, she said politely and smiled gently at Kumiko. The white-haired girl returned the smile and bow. I hope so too. Well, now that is taken care of, Kumiko and I need to go. We have some business to attend to, Kakashi said and put a hand on the girl's shoulder. With a final goodbye, both of them disappeared in a blur, leaving behind a slightly puzzled Naruto and Sakura. Both of them figured Kumiko was nice enough and thought they would probably get to know her a bit better later. When they finished thinking about the new addition to their team, they both looked at each other. Naruto, I want to talk to you, Sakura quickly said as she saw the look Naruto was sending her. What about your precious Sasuke-kun? Naturo spat. He was fed up with it. He would no longer stand for Sakura mooning over someone who didn't deserve it. Heck, the little Tor didn't even deserve to wipe dog shit off of Naruto's new army boots as far as he was concerned. Sakura herself was also getting angry and her inner self shouted out some rather colorful insults at the expense of the blonde genin. She planted herself on the railing of the bridge they stood on with forced calm and motioned for Naruto to do the same. He grudgingly sat down next to her and scowled. At the sun which was setting earlier and earlier every day. No, she started through clenched teeth. I just wanted to thank you for bringing him back and to congratulate you. Whatever, Naruto said shortly, though he was surprised that Sakura would tell him this now. To his horror, Sakura started crying, and if there was one thing Naruto didn't know how to deal with, it was girls crying. What the? I don't love Sasuke anymore, Naruto. She sobbed and let her tears fall down and stain her pants as they were absorbed by the black skin-tight clothing. I realized it when IV versus visit. Ed him the day after why you brought him back. The blonde boy was in shock. Sakura didn't love Sasuke anymore. Did that mean he had a chance again? No, you idiot, you've got a girlfriend already, he thought and smiled inwardly at the thought of Temari. But seeing the girl next to him crying herself hoarse, he did the only thing that made sense at the time. Sakura startled slightly when Naruto PPED his arms around the shoulders of the pink-haired Kunoichi and planted a soft kiss on her slightly large forehead. She quickly threw her own arms around him and bawled as the emotions she bottled up lately all came bursting out. When Sakura's body finally stopped shaking, Naruto put a hand under her chin and forced her to look up. He gazed at her tear-blotched face and finally into her watery green eyes. "Sakura-chan," he said, and Sakura smiled slightly at the return of the "chan" at the end of her name. "I'm sorry, it must hurt. I know what it's like because I've also stopped liking you that way," he continued and gave her a gentle smile. Another small sob escaped Sakura's lips and Naruto wiped away the couple of tears that once again rolled down her face with his thumbs. "I still like you, but I don't have a crush on you anymore. I've got a girlfriend now, you know." When he said that, the pink-haired girl's eyes widened slightly. Naruto has a girlfriend, she thought, but Naruto stopped any further thinking when he spoke up again. "I'm really sorry about the way I treated you. I thought you still liked Sasuke. But I want to make it up to you. So, friends?" he asked. "Friends," Sakura affirmed with a slight nod and smile. Naruto then wrapped an arm around Sakura's shoulders as she wrapped an arm of her own around his waist, and they both stared at the sunset, relieved that they talked things out and hoping that a strong friendship would bloom forth from failed childish crushes. "Consequences. What in the hell are you smiling about?" was the greeting Naruto received when he sat down on the couch opposite Kankuro. After making sure Sakura got home safely, he went back to the house he now shared with the three Sand siblings. Things were good as far as the blonde boy was concerned. Not even the sight of a disgusted puppet using good-for-nothing fat ass, as Naruto lovingly called Kankuro, could spoil his mood. He had gotten himself a girlfriend this morning, and got back on good terms with a certain pink-haired Kunoichi. Yep. Things were definitely on a roll. Grinning broadly, Naruto looked at the brother of his new girlfriend. "Oh man, that is so gonna piss him off," he thought, and his grin got even larger if that were possible. Now, Kankuro was used to the horrors of battle. Chopped off limbs and gore splattering on his black ensemble didn't faze him much. But the grinning genin who sat in front of him disturbed him greatly on a whole new level. "Stop looking at me like that, damn it," he shouted, desperate for Naruto to stop that icky grinning of his. "Wouldn't you like to know, doll boy?" said a very amused Naruto, and watched Kankuro scrunch up his face in barely suppressed rage. With that said, he got up and hopped merrily to the staircase and up to his room. When he heard a loud roar downstairs, he quickly opened the door, stepped in his room and closed it. Standing still for a few seconds, he finally couldn't control himself any longer and dropped on the floor laughing. He clutched his sides and rolled over the floor as tears of mirth appeared in the corners of his eyes. Bumping in the desk that stood in his room, something fell down and hit him squarely in the forehead. "Ow!" he cried out and got up, rubbing the now sore spot of his head. Naruto looked down at what had hit him and picked it up. It was the scroll his sensei had given him the night before. Opening the scroll, he saw the technique Kakashi had developed for him. The blonde boy blanched as he read it and felt his happiness leave him like someone pulled a stopper in his stomach to let it all drain away. He nearly dropped the scroll when he heard someone knocking softly on his door. Thinking quickly, he rolled the scroll back up and threw it in one of the drawers of his desk. "Why, yes, come in," Naruto said a little shakily and tried to look innocent. The door opened and revealed a smiling Temari. "You shouldn't make him so mad, you know. What did you do to him anyway?" She had heard Naruto come home and the roar of her brother, but decided to wait to say hello until her new boyfriend was inside his room next to her own. "Oh, well, I didn't do anything. She wanted to know something, but I didn't tell him," the blonde boy answered and stepped aside to allow her entry to his room. "You won't be hurt when I say I don't believe you, right?" Temari said as she looked around at Naruto's bedroom. Not at all. But it's the truth though," Naruto said as he scratched the back of his head. "So what's up?" The sandy-haired girl turned on her heels and looked slightly downwards at Naruto as he was slightly smaller in stature. "Well, I know it sounds silly, but I kind of missed you." The blue-eyed boy blushed as the full realization of his current situation dawned on him. A girl in his bedroom. His girlfriend in his bedroom, and she said she had missed him. His still developing hormones raged and planted several scenarios in his mind that his white-haired sensei would gladly to put in his books. I missed you too. He croaked and nervously clasped his now clammy hands in front of him while he swallowed a lump that had formed in his throat. Good, Temari said simply, and before her boyfriend could figure out what she had meant by that, she grabbed his face and pushed her lips on his. Naruto's knees turned to jelly as the absolutely wonderful kiss went on for ages and ages. When the new object of his total and utter affection finally pulled back, he was only able to make odd gurgling sounds. Gur, ga, woo. He then blinked stupidly several times as his mouth tried to form a coherent response. Feeling quite pleased with herself, Temari grinned. Good night, Naruto-kun. She then gave him another soft kiss on the lips and left his room, leaving behind a bewildered boy whose mind had shut down and wouldn't work properly until a full hour later when night had fully taken over. Shikamaru, get up this instant. A woman shouted through a door and banged her fist forcefully on it. Startled awake, the black-haired Chunin fell out of bed and landed harshly on the floor with his head while his legs were still entangled in his bed sheets. He frowned at the door upside down through half-opened eyes for a moment and allowed his brain to start the thinking process. What the hell did I do now? Before he could answer that question, the woman shouted again, get your lazy butt out of bed right now or I'll drag you down the stairs by your hair and show your underwear to your girlfriend. Girlfriend? Shikamaru thought, panicked, and picked himself up from the floor quickly. I'll be right there, geez. As he got dressed and washed up haphazardly, he had only one thought on his mind, who in the world was downstairs and had the gall to call herself his girlfriend. Stomping out of his room and down the stairs into the living room moodily, he got his answer. Now I know why you always pull your hair into a ponytail. Shika-kun, a familiar female voice giggled. Grabbing his hair and roughly bundling it on the top of his head, he growled with a pink tinge on his face. Stop laughing, damn it. T.S. earned him a hard whack over the head from his mother as she lectured him on cursing in her household. He should have known who the visitor was though. It was Ino. Who the hell told you that you were my girlfriend? Shikamaru said and winced as his mother once again whacked him on the head and glared at him. I didn't say that, Ino said and had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Oh sorry dear, that's my fault. I thought you were. You'll be staying for lunch, won't you? Shikamaru's mother said airily, apparently not aware of the embarrassment she had caused. I'd love to, ma'am, the blonde girl said to quickly steer away from the subject of girlfriends. But deep down she had to admit that girlfriend didn't sound all that bad when she looked sideways at the grumpy-looking Chunin. After a hearty meal which consisted mainly of dumplings and a steaming bowl of miso soup, Ino and Shikamaru found themselves near a field lined with high fences where the Nara clan raised and cared for their deer. Coughing slightly, Shikamaru broke the silence. So what do you want? Well, I was wondering if you could tell me about what happened when you were all sent to retrieve Sasuke. Ino asked and looked off into the distance at nothing in particular. The black-haired Chunin sighed and fed a sugar cube that he had fished out of one of his pockets to a deer with huge antlers that had approached them silently. Not much to tell. Me, Choji, Neji, Kiba and Lee got beaten up, but we managed to beat those sound creeps with the help from the Sand Trio. Naruto roughed up Sasuke pretty bad and that's it, he said and threw his head backwards so he could look up at the sky. You got beaten up too? Ino asked him disbelievingly. Well, that crazy bitch I fought used some freak summons which I managed to take over with my shadow manipulation, but then she used some sort of genjutsu so I had to break my own finger. In the end I got saved by that girl with that dumb oversized fan of hers. Shikamaru answered, still a bit angry that a girl of all things had saved him. Ino gasped, you broke your own finger? And grabbed Shikamaru's hands to inspect them. It doesn't hurt anymore, does it? No, of course not, the lazy Chunin said and tried to pull his hands away, but Ino held them in place with a firm grip. Still, her hands felt kind of good and soft. For a girl anyway, he thought and looked down at the small perfectly manicured hands holding his own slightly larger ones. You know, I never got the chance to thank you, Ino said softly and trailed a delicate finger down Shikamaru's calloused palm and looked up to stare into his eyes. Seeing those sparkling warm blue eyes look into his own dark brown ones, he was slightly unsure of what to say. "Why would you thank me?" he asked, and a faint red started to stain both their cheeks. Yamanaka Ino never got to answer that question as a boy with spiky brown hair and a blue scarf around his neck came running and screaming past them. The two of them quickly took a step back from each other and saw a group of girls shrieking, "Choji-kun, wait!" as they rampaged in the direction the screaming boy was headed, leaving behind a cloud of dust. Ino giggled and Shikamaru scowled. "It seems Choji has his own fan club now, doesn't it, Shika-kun?" Ino said and giggled yet again. The Chunin scoffed. "I told I am to end his fight with that sound nin without using the last pill. Bah, this is too troublesome. Come on, we'd better check if he needs help." While another couple was chasing after a certain screaming boy, Sakura was quite literally flying through the air with her back bent backwards in a graceful arch, only to impact the dirt a few seconds later with a loud and sickening thud. She grunted and, ever so slowly, picked herself up from the ground to stand shakily on her legs, wiping the blood that trickled out of the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand and wincing from the various bruises on her body that were undoubtedly going to be very sore in the morning. She glared at the figure that had sent her flying. It was not that he hurt her, oh no. It was that he started to panic and running over to make sure she was okay. She felt herself getting extremely angry. She was sick and tired of people treating her like a fragile little glass ornament that would shatter at the merest touch. "Damn it, Sakura-chan, I'm so sorry. Are you alright? Did I hurt you?" Lee shouted as the questions came rolling out of his mouth like a never-ending waterfall, not giving the pink-haired Kunoichi a chance to answer. "Lee-kun, be quiet," she yelled angrily and inwardly sighed when the boy with the extremely fuzzy eyebrows cowered in front of her. Today they both had decided that they would have a sparring session, and Sakura held herself pretty well. Only Lee went a little overboard when he kicked Sakura hard under the chin. The stamina training from the past week had really paid off for Sakura, but she was still absolutely no match for Lee when it came to taijutsu. As the black-haired genin saw the blazing fire in the eyes of his crush, he stopped cowering. Sakura didn't want any babying, and that made him proud. If he was going to do everything in his power to get stronger himself, why wouldn't she? He stood up and put his left hand behind his back while his right hand was stretched forward in his standard battle pose. "Let's try this again, Sakura-chan," Lee said and smiled at the trembling but determined figure in front of him. "Traitors. Go back to your own home. Murderers. My friend got killed because of you bastards. Just ignore them," a boy who was carrying a large gourd on his back said to his brother and sister. They were just walking down a small market place back from another meeting with the other teams from the Hidden Sand, when they were surrounded by an ever-growing mob of people. Trying not to provoke any attacks, they stood silently in the middle of a jeering crowd as they shouted insults at the three siblings. "You'll pay, you brats," a young man with black hair yelled and threw a rock he had picked up seconds before at the siblings. It struck Temari hard on the side of her head with a loud crunch. She looked confused for a moment and then fell down on the ground unconscious as a small trickle of blood ran down her left temple. Konkuro had fights with her all the time, but he loved his sister very much, even though he would never say that to her face. Snarling and cursing, he hovered over her to check if she was all right. Gaara's eyes blazed for a brief moment before they locked on the man who had hurt his sister. Walking up to him, Gaara summoned his sand to gather around the arm the man used to throw the rock. "Sabaku Q, Desert Coffin. You will never use that arm again." With that statement, he lifted an outstretched hand and squeezed it into a fist. "Sabaku Susu, Desert Graveyard." The man screamed in agony as the sand compressed and obliterated muscles and bones alike, staining the ground with crimson blood that spewed forth. The crowd erupted into a fit of panic as they saw this gruesome scene unfold in front of them and ran in all directions to get away from the two brothers that would have no qualms about killing them in an instant. Beating down the killer instinct of the raccoon demon, Shukaku, inside him, Gaara was still itching to finish the job. He wanted to turn the man who had hurt his sister into a puddle of goo as he sat there whimpering and clutching the mangled and bloody piece of flesh that used to be his right arm. "You shouldn't have done that," a voice suddenly said. "You," Konkuro said from behind his little brother. You're that bug-using freak. My name is Aburame Shino. The boy said calmly from the rooftop he was sitting on. He jumped down and crouched in front of the rock-throwing offender and turned to look at the two brothers through his sunglasses that covered his eyes. He still wore his oversized gray jacket with the high collar that covered half his face, the standard open-toed sandals and gray slacks. I'll have to report this to the Hokage. Gaara nodded, his face devoid of any emotion once again. He motioned his brother to pick up their sister. If someone hurts her again, I'll kill them. That said, he walked away with Konkoro close behind as he carried Temari in his arms. A soft sobbing caught Shino's attention and he looked down. You shouldn't have done that either, he said, and helped the man stagger towards the hospital where it undoubtedly would be amputated. Neji, a girl yelled with two black buns bobbing dangerously on the top of her head as she ran towards a boy with pupil-less aquamarine eyes. What is it, Tenten? Neji said. He might have loosened up a little, but he was still the haughty bastard as ever. He didn't consider anyone that couldn't hold their own in battle worthy of his respect. He looked at his teammate who wore her usual pink Chinese-styled vest, black pants that ended just below the knees and her feet that were in open sandals with two straps. Did you hear what happened? Tenten said, slightly breathless. Neji's eyes narrowed in slight annoyance. Hear what? The genin team that the Hidden Sand sent to help us was attacked by the villagers. But that red-haired guy who fought Lee managed to scare them off when he crushed some guy's arm. The black-haired girl said. Gaara, Tenten continued. Yeah, it seems the girl I fought in the Chunin exam got a concussion when a rock hit her in the head. Gaara was reprimanded, but Hokage-sama is going to punish the villagers that attacked them. The villagers are like a herd of cattle. Easily scared, dumb as the back end of a pig, and to make it worse they hold grudges like no other. The Hyuga said contemptuously. Tenten giggled. I also heard that Naruto went ballistic when he heard. I wonder what's up with him. He lives with them in one house. Neji explained. Really? I didn't know. The weapons specialist frowned. Well, I have to go and run some errands for my mother. Bye, Neji, she said and smiled at her teammate and ran towards one shop or another. Bye, Neji muttered. He was lost in thought as he wondered why Naruto would get so upset from that girl getting injured. When Kakashi walked onto training field 4, he LD feel a palpable presence of powerful chakra emanating from the center of the field. He saw Naruto beating the heavy training logs to cinders with his fists while he was encircled by a raging hurricane of red chakra. I guess he heard about Temari. The silver-haired Junin thought. He wasn't worried that Kyuubi would escape since he had heard that the blonde boy had controlled its power during his fight against Neji and Gaara, and of course when he went after Sasuke. Not to mention he's too pig-headed to be controlled by the demon fox. He continued in his mind and smiled beneath his mask. When the Junin came closer, Naruto turned to his teacher with burning red slitted eyes. He could feel the fury the boy radiated like a liquid heat wave that splashed against him like an ocean would against a jagged shoreline. Yo, he said simply. What are you doing here, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto said in a feral growl. I wanted to talk to you, that's all. Kakashi said and squatted on his heels. The blonde boy resumed his beating of the log. I'm busy right now, sensei. Kakashi shrugged. No use in getting angry. Gaara already made sure the guy lost the arm with which he threw the rock with. Well, I'm going to rip off the other arm and strangle him with it. Naruto said, and with a punch enhanced with red chakra he reduced the poor log he was targeting to splinters. That would be a bad idea. The Junin said, clearly amused. I don't care. Naruto said dejectedly and sat down next to his teacher, his eyes returning to normal, and panted heavily. Kakashi closed his visible eye in a happy crinkle. But your girlfriend would, he said, which earned him a hard shove from the younger boy. Propping himself on his elbows as he laid back, Naruto sighed. What do you want to talk about? Have you read the scroll I gave you for your birthday? Was the reply. Yeah, I have. What's the big idea with it anyway? Can't you develop something that I can do on my own? The blonde boy snapped. Don't be an idiot. If he's in your body he might as well make himself useful. Kakashi explained. If you develop techniques using Kyuubi's chakra you can become even more powerful. I'd rather be strong using my own chakra. Quote. Naruto whined. Look, you have a crazy amount of stamina. With Oni no Kiba no Jutsu, Demon Fang technique, you'll be able to use that more efficiently. The older man said. 1. But I've never fought with a katana. How am I going to learn? Naruto said, still resisting slightly. The silver-haired Junin ruffled Naruto's hair and looked up to the sky. Here the stars were twinkling merrily down at the two of them. That's up to Kumiko. Every member of her clan learned how to be a master of swordplay at a young age. Her training wasn't completed, but she is by far the most skilled in the use of swords than anyone here in Konoha. Naruto looked quizzically at his sensei for a moment. Wasn't completed. Why not? That's up to her to tell you if she decides to. Kakashi said and stood up. He brushed off the back of his pants to remove several blades of grass that clung stubbornly to the black fabric. Think about it, he said and disappeared in a small cloud of smoke. Naruto found himself in a dilemma. On one hand, he didn't want to use Kyuubi's chakra simply because he didn't like that overgrown fur ball, but on the other hand he did want to become stronger. As he covered the various pros and cons in his mind, he headed home. He would decide later because right now there was a certain girl that he wanted to take care of. 1. Oni no Kiba no Jutsu, Demon Fang Technique. Calling upon the Kyuubi chakra, Naruto is able to make a 4-foot, 121, 92 centimeters long katana. Due to it being created out of chakra alone, Naruto can make it as sharp or blunt as he wants at will. Its distinct feature is that it is a translucent red blade which looks like it's dripping crimson flames. Songs that helped me during writing of this chapter. Ah, My Goddess, the movie Ost, Try to Wish, Kitty, Brackish, Slipknot, Duality, cool mix of songs. Memories. Gaara sat in his room after being relieved by Naruto from his bedside watch over his sister. He was no fool. He knew what was going on between the two of them. He saw the shocked look on Naruto's face when he came home and saw Temari with a small strip of bandage around her head. He also saw that same shocked look turn into absolute rage and killer intent as the blonde boy ran out of the house to go somewhere and blow off some steam. He also noticed the odd glow that had started emanating from his sister ever since the day after Naruto's birthday party. No, Gaara was no fool, but he would rip off the boy's head if he hurt Temari in any way whatsoever. You've done well today, a voice cooed. What are you talking about? Gaara asked. He knew who was talking. It was the source of the torture he faced in his mind every day. But the torture had lessened a great deal ever since he had been beaten by a certain blonde genin. Ever since he had realized there was more than mindless slaughtering. Such delicious anger. Why did you stop? You know you wanted to continue. The voice said. Yes, I did. Then why didn't you? The voice asked. Because it would make others sad. You don't care about that. They need to learn to fear you again, to fear us. The voice roared. They do fear me. They don't fear you enough. The voice stated simply. Yes, they do. I don't want to be feared. I don't care. I want to protect those precious to me. Like him. You know you enjoyed it. The voice laughed. You enjoyed the man screaming as you took away his arm. Didn't you just shudder in delight at the sight of the beautiful blood that spilled from his wounds? You can't fool me. No. Oh yes you did, you weakling. Admit it. You still have the killer instinct. Let it out. Let people fear you. Let it give you the reason to exist. Shut up. Gaara yelled inside his mind. Give me my sacrifices. I want blood. You will give it to me. The voice yelled as it completely lost control. Shut up. Gaara now screamed outwardly and forcefully put the demon inside him back to its dark corner where it wouldn't be able to bother him anymore, for now anyway. He clutched his head and steadied himself for the painful headache that always came when Shukaku assaulted him mentally. Feeling the pain surge up, he closed his eyes, drifting off to sleep for those few and precious hours every night that he was able to keep the demon at bay that lived inside him. Naruto was biting back tears. He felt helpless. He was no medic and he couldn't even beat up the man who had hurt the girl he loved. Was it really love? When he found out that Temari had been hurt, something snapped inside him. He hadn't felt that way when Sakura was being pinned to a tree by Gaara and then slowly crushed until the two boys with demons inside them had run out of chakra. He sat there next to her still form, looking down at the slightly older girl. Her 4 pigtails were starting to loosen up and the strands of hair that refused to stay in place were sticking to her pale face. She looks so cute like that for some reason, Naruto thought, and a small smile creased his lips. That was when he broke down and tried to sob as softly as he could, trying not to disturb the sleeping girl. He hated this. He wanted to protect those he loved with all that he had. If he had to use Kyuubi to get stronger, then he would. He picked up one of her soft hands and stroked it gently across the back with his thumbs. Tears that glittered in the moonlight dropped down on both their hands when Naruto couldn't restrain them any longer. Temari stirred and opened her eyes to look at the wetness that she felt on her hands. She trailed the tears that dropped with her emerald eyes that were clouded by fatigue and looked up into pain's shimmering blue depths. "Why are you crying?" she asked softly. "Temari-chan," Naruto said hoarsely, startled that she had awoken. When he saw a wince flash across her face, he lowered his voice to a mere whisper. "You should go back to sleep, Temari-chan. I'm sorry I woke you up." "Why are you crying, Naruto-kun?" she asked again in the same soft tone. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. When I saw you lying here on your bed, my heart hurt so badly," he said and clutched his chest as sobs racked his body. "I never felt this way before. Is this?" He took a deep shuddering breath. "Is this what love is?" Her own heart swelled so much that it felt like it would nearly burst as she heard his confession. Pain flashed through her body as she moved on her side, but she ignored it. Confusion was written on Naruto's face as he saw her move, but he remained silent. Lifting her blanket, she patted the empty space she had created. Instincts took over when the blonde boy lied down beside her and allowed the blanket to cover them both. They both held each other that night, allowing their warmth to comfort each other. When the tears had finally dried up, Naruto nuzzled Temari's neck and she placed her chin on top of his head. And the two of them fell asleep with a final contented sigh. Temari dreamed that night on how she had started to care so deeply about the boy that lay next to her in her room. "Temari, Kankuro, I'm sorry. That had started it all." After the fight with Uzumaki Naruto, the blonde boy that no one acknowledged, Gaara, had changed. Kankuro had been utterly dumbfounded, but not as much as his sister, Temari. She had been surprised when that loud-mouthed brat had defeated Neji, who was a genius from the supposedly strongest family of the Hidden Leaf, the Hyuga. But when the same annoying brat had also defeated her younger brother, the boy with the feared raccoon demon, Shukaku, inside of him, she was shocked, to put it very mildly. What kind of person is he? What kind of power does he possess? She wondered. They had been rushing through the forest that surrounded Konoha for days. Occasionally they stopped for a few hours of sleep and something to eat, but no doubt they would be expected to be back at their own village as soon as possible. For the first time in her life, Temari was truly scared to go back. They had failed their mission and brought shame on the hidden sand. What could the possible repercussions be? When they finally reached the edge of the massive forest, they noticed its subtle transition from lush greenery into the harsh heat of the desert. Just a few more steps and they would enter the wind country. Exhausted, Temari sat down in the shade and closed her eyes for a few moments. Feeling someone sit down next to her, she spoke up. "Kankuro, what will happen to us?" Her brother sighed. "I don't know, sis. Gaara never failed anything before." Pausing for a while, Temari tried to enjoy the coolness of the fire country before they would be running under the glaring sun and hoping that their pitiful footwear would provide enough protection from the burning sand. She glanced at her youngest brother, Gaara. As always, he was sitting silently, but instead of having his usual uncaring look in his eyes, he seemed to be locked in an internal struggle. "Gaara, what has happened to you?" she mentally asked her brother. Temari would have liked to sit there for a little while longer to rest her weary legs and wait for the night to fall, but her brother tapped her on the shoulder as a signal to get moving again. She knew they had no choice, and after sure her battle fan was securely strapped on her back, all three siblings seemingly disappeared and ran as fast as they could towards their village. "We have been forced to surrender to the Leaf," an old and weary voice said. Immediately cries of outrage and disbelief echoed through the great cavern hewn out of a sandstone cliff that overlooked the village of the Hidden Sand. When the three siblings had returned to their village, windswept and with sand and dust filling every pore of their body, their sensei, Baki, had shown up and told them without a word of welcome that they were expected in the presence of the village elders. No one dared to disobey a direct summon of the council under the penalty of death, so now they sat amidst a large group of sand shinobi who were reacting quite strongly to the fact that they would surrender. We should attack them again, the leaf will crumble. A man in the back yelled. This is a disgrace. A woman, dressed in what seemed to a bleached toga, shrieked hysterically. Silence. The voice came from an old man with a wrinkled face as he brandished a large metal ball that caused sparks to fly as he smacked it hard on a metal plate fastened on top of a large and long wooden table. He looked to the left and then to the right at the other old figures that sat beside him. The decision has been made. The sand has been dishonored. One of the 3 legendary Sannin, Orochimaru, killed the cage and fooled us into making a temporary alliance. We all thought that, together with the sound, we could defeat the leaf. A painful silence followed after these words had been spoken. Their cage was dead. Orochimaru had tricked them. They had betrayed their ally, the hidden leaf, for nothing. Although the news that their father died at the hands of Orochimaru made the 3 siblings angry, it wasn't because of their last remaining parent dying. He didn't love them and so they didn't love him back. To him they had only been a tool. Nothing more than to help him gain greater power. That's why he had purposely let Shukaku possess Gaara in the first place. An old woman with colorful sharpened nails who sat next to the old man the large crowd gathered in front of them spoke up next. We must appoint a new cage as well as take care of certain other things. She said and looked sternly at the 3 siblings who sat in front. While potential candidates are selected for the tournament, Baki-san will be appointed as steward of our village. Life was harsh in the desert and this was reflected upon the village. It what you were ordered to do or you died. Everyone pulled their own weight and no one was allowed to slack off. Unlike in the hidden leaf, cages were tested to prove their strength and leadership capabilities. This was usually done by a gathering of would-be contenders who would beat each other in combat. Although killing was not necessary and preferably avoided, the tournament was known to be brutal and bloody. When a winner was declared, females were considered a weaker sex in the hidden sand and therefore not allowed to enter, would receive additional training to become even stronger. Temari was shocked. Their sensei was chosen as the steward, a temporary replacement for the cage. That meant he would be unable to teach them anything until the new cage was chosen, and that could take up to 2 years. She fumed and was about to shout something when unexpectedly, Gaara laid a hand on one of her balled fists. Do not worry, he said in a soft voice. Temari gaped at her youngest brother. Was he actually comforting her? Things had taken a very different turn lately. Finally having regained her senses she nodded dumbly and tried to focus on the elders again. Everyone is dismissed, the old man that sat in the center said and slammed the iron ball on the iron plate once more. When the 3 siblings had made their way out of the cavern and walked through the deserted streets of the village towards their own home, Temari shouted some colorful remarks that her brother, Kankuro, would not have dared to repeat. How dare they? How the hell are we going to get stronger now? What the hell is going to happen to us? The girl with 4 pigtails shouted when she had calmed down somewhat. God, shut up already would you? Kankuro growled at his sister. He was in no mood for this. He kicked one of his sandaled feet into the sand that was, of course, everywhere and caused it to fly up and then into his eyes as the wind suddenly picked up. Temari whacked our insolent brother over the head and opened the front door of their house that they had finally reached. Out of sheer habit, Temari and Kankuro stepped back to allow Gaara entry first. Stepping inside after him they looked around. The house was simple like everything in the village. Every available resource was used in the most efficient way possible. The desert didn't forgive brash luxury easily. Save for some painted fans. The walls were completely bare. All the furniture had the same sandy color and only a rug with some holes in it adorned the floor. The house had only 2 floors, ground floor included. And all the rooms, save the living room and kitchen, were as small as possible. Even being the children of the cage didn't offer perks where living space was concerned. Larger things caught more wind and were worn down more easily, or at least that was what their father had always said to them. The only truly impressive building stood in the center of the village, and that was the building where the cage resided. The 3 of them had barely sat down when someone rapped loudly on the front door. Grumbling loudly, Temari got up and opened the door. Baki-sensei, she exclaimed. What are you doing here? She knew perfectly well what he was doing standing in front of their house. he was to pass judgment on them for failing their mission. And from past experiences, Temari knew that failure was costly. Gulping, she bowed slightly and stepped back to let her sensei, the new steward of the Hidden Sand, step inside their house. As always, Baki was all business. I am not going to be your sensei anymore. You will call me Baki-sama from now on. As you heard in the meeting, the Hidden Sand has surrendered to the Hidden Leaf. The repercussions of that will be made known shortly. Even though we were fooled by Orochimaru, you three still failed your mission, therefore we cannot allow you to do missions until we deem otherwise. You are advised to remain in your house. Without giving any of the three a chance to respond, Baki walked out of the house and slammed the door shut. Temari and Kankuro looked at each other and then nervously at Gaara. Who had Ramai? Ned silent and motionless throughout the whole time, Baki had been speaking. This was going to be difficult. Several weeks had passed and Gaara and Kankuro were often gone for days on end to train. Temari knew it was best to leave them to their own devices and not interfere. She herself had also trained vigorously out in the open desert and had even signed a summoning contract with a creature that called itself Kamedachi. He was a huge ferret with markings strangely similar to what a panda would have. He had been impressed by the sheer force of Temari's Kamedachi Cyclone Blade N. He was amused by the fact that her technique had the same name as him. After having for Temari very disturbing, talk with the creature, it had imbued her fan with a strange power to make it more durable and she would only need to streak it with a line of blood to be able to summon him. They had also found out exactly why they had been advised to stay inside their own home. Everyone in their village had by now heard that the Hidden Sand had been forced to surrender and they weren't happy at all. They needed someone to blame and unfortunately that role had always fallen on Gaara. Since the Y knew that they couldn't attack him without suffering a gruesome and bloody death, they attacked the next best thing. Gaara's brother and sister couldn't walk the streets without people spitting at him or attacking them one way or the other, be it by throwing harmless clumps of wet sand or kunai. For the last 2 weeks they had been able to defend themselves but one day, they were told that they weren't allowed to carry their weapons anymore. When Temari and Kankuro returned home after shopping for food, they staggered through the front door where Gaara was sitting in the living room. They were scratched, bruised and covered in dirt. They both winced when they sat on one of the couches and closed their eyes out of pure exhaustion. What happened? The red-haired boy asked as he stared at them unblinkingly. Kankuro groaned. Those damn villagers and a couple of genins attacked us. Since we weren't allowed to carry our weapons anymore, we couldn't defend ourselves as well as we normally can. I will kill them, Gaara said simply and was already halfway to the door when Temari called out to him. Please don't, Gaara, it will only cause more trouble, it's nothing. Temari pleaded, desperate to stop her little brother from going on a killing spree. Gaara merely looked back over his shoulder and wordlessly turned around to walk up the stairs towards his own room, to do whatever it was he did. As he couldn't sleep properly at night. Come on Temari, we'd better get some sleep. Maybe Baki-sama will tell us something tomorrow. Kankuro said hopefully. He then hoisted himself from the couch and trudged up the stairs to sleep and hoped that his body wouldn't be as sore in the morning as it was now. Temari however decided that she would take a nice and long relaxing shower. Unlike Kankuro, she always valued a proper hygiene. She didn't know what Gaara did to keep himself clean but then again she didn't want to find out either. She walked up to her room and picked up one of her most precious possessions. It was a luxurious fluffy light blue towel she had bought when she and her brothers were on a mission in a village somewhere at the eastern border of the Wind Country. There they could afford to be luxurious as they lived close to a forest and a large lake. It had been one of the best times of her life. She had even managed to take a swim and have a little fun before they returned after their mission was completed. Clutching the towel and some toiletries, she made her way to the small bathroom. She placed her things on a shelf away from the shower to keep it from getting wet and turned a knob to let the water flow from the shower head. The jets of warm water bounced off of her as she moved her hands all over her to remove the filth and grime that had piled up over the last few days. When she was finished, she undid her pigtails and let her sandy-colored hair spill over her shoulders. She stuck her head under the water and grasped blindly for the shampoo bottle. Squirting out a significant amount, she massaged it firmly into her hair and scalp. After letting the white foam remain in her hair for a few moments, she rinsed it out. Normally she would have done this as quickly as she possibly could to preserve water, but today she couldn't seem to care. Her mind was a turbulent mass as she thought about how Gaara had changed. He had even listened to her just now and went up to his room. Thinking about this, her thoughts went to a certain blonde boy. Naruto. She didn't know why, but he had changed her brother somehow. She was intent to find out exactly how he did it, and for some reason she really wanted to thank him. This new and improved Gaara could only be for the best, and it was all because of that hyperactive boy who she had thought of as a worthless shinobi. Somehow she would return to the hidden leaf and find him again. With that firm resolve in her mind, Temari turned off the water and dried herself off, allowing the fluffy piece of cloth to caress her skin gently. Tying it around her body, she went back to her room and went to sleep, her dreams being only about a blonde boy whom everyone underestimated. The next day, the 3 siblings were summoned to the Cage's building. 2 of the 3 were clearly dreading what was to come, but Gaara, as usual, didn't show any emotion at all. When they entered the building and stood before Baki, Temari and Kankuro knelt and touched their hands and forehead to the floor respectfully. Gaara simply remained standing and folded his arms in front of his chest in clear contempt. Baki, knowing this would happen, didn't say anything about it. He sat on a large red pillow and motioned them to sit down normally. The leaf has a new Hokage. Her name is Tsunade, one of the legendary 3. Baki said. A woman. Temari wondered in amazement. Although it is a custom of ours not to let women become Kage, we have to respect their customs. From what I've heard, she is a very powerful kunoichi. She fears another attack from that traitorous snake, Orochimaru, and has therefore requested our help. He said and looked at the 3 that sat before him. I have mobilized a Yoni N team and 2 Chunin teams to help them. They will remain there for 5 years to aid the rebuilding of Konoha and accomplish missions on their behalf. I am however looking for another team consisting of Genins. Baki already knew what was coming and wasn't disappointed when Gaara spoke up without looking at him directly. We will go, he stated, without any emotion. What? Kankuro yelled, surprised. But, Gaara, that's 5 years we're talking about. Gaara looked at his brother and repeated himself. We will go, emphasizing the will part this time. Even though his brother was showing signs of change, Kankuro was still very much afraid of him and remained quiet. Temari, however, was inwardly pleased. This way they could get away from those damn villagers and walk the streets without being attacked. Or at least that was what she hoped. Not to mention, she would be able to see a certain boy whom she wanted to thank. When do we leave Baki-sama? She asked. Kankuro's eyes bulged as he heard his sister. Am I the only one who doesn't want to go? He thought angrily. A ghost of a smile seemed to appear on their former sensei's face. You leave tomorrow. Pack only necessary clothing and weaponry. Housing and other accommodations will be made available for you when you arrive. After asking for a few more details about their new assignment, the 3 were dismissed and went home to pack a few meager belongings and get a good night's rest before they would be returning to the village that they had attempted to destroy less than a month ago. Temari, wake up. NNGH, wah. Temari said groggily as she bolted upright in her bed when someone had entered her room and shouted at her. Wake up, now, Kankuro. What the hell is going on? She asked angrily. Temari did not like to be woken up very early in the morning when she was having a good dream. Especially not by her annoying brother. We have to leave. Baki-sama received an urgent message from that new female Hokage. Apparently that Uchiha character is a traitor and just left Hidden Leaf. She sent a team of genins after him and some sound nins and wants us to help them. Kankuro said quickly and was already pulling a black shirt over his head and strapping his puppets on his back at the same time. Temari looked incredulously at her brother for a moment, then slammed the door in his face and got dressed in record time. She snatched up her bags and her fan, ran out of her room, down the stairs and out of their house, and met up with her 2 brothers who were already waiting for her outside in the near darkness of the desert morning. Not wasting any words, they looked at each other for a moment and then disappeared in a blur of speed as they made their way to the fire country. Arg, what the hell? Kankuro was shocked. He was terrified. He was angry. What the $% is he doing here? He roared. Being in a very nice mood, Konkuro had decided to be a good little brother. Bring his bedridden sister a nice cup of soup. However, when he had walked upstairs and opened the door to her room, read to say a cheery, good morning, and everything, he saw the new annoying and perpetual thorn in his life. A pest by the name of Uzumaki Naruto, sharing the same futon with Temari. Konkuro's sister Temari. Naruto was currently unaware of all this, fortunately he was always in a very foggy state of mind when he just woke up and wouldn't understand what was happening to him until at least a half an hour had passed. Temari, however, found herself clutching her head while experiencing a throbbing headache and was just about to scold her little brother when she realized exactly what kind of compromising situation she was in. Her eyes wide, she uttered the only thing that came to mind. Ah crap. Songs that helped during the writing of this chapter. Kidney Thieves, Before I'm Dead, Dolce Triade, Prayer for Love, Unloco, Bruises, Secrets Revealed. This chapter is dedicated to Princess Tsunade and her little sister, who bops Princess on the head for me every once in a while. Naruto was in a happy daze, even though he was awoken quite abruptly by something he couldn't quite identify. He felt all warm and fuzzy inside. Even a sweet angelic voice was calling to him. Ah, it was bliss. Hang on, the voice called again. He opened his eyes blearily, squinting, and scratching his head with his left hand, he yawned before he focused on a pretty face hovering in front of him. Naruto-kun, could you please wait outside for a few minutes? The sweet voice said. Nodding, he stood up. Wobbling slightly, he yawned again and unsteadily walked towards the door of the room he found himself in. Naruto wanted to do anything the pretty face asked of him, it sounded so sweet and innocent. He never noticed a brown-haired boy standing frozen in the doorway with a horrified expression on his face. After he stepped outside, Naruto closed the door and stood tottering in the hallway. Blinking slowly every few seconds, he heard a few muffled sentences coming from one source in the room he just exited, which sounded awfully like, "What's going on here? What the hell are you going to do with that? And, now hang on, let's talk about this." Quite suddenly, he was sure he heard the shrill scream of what sounded like a 6-year-old girl and a heavy something being thrown against the door. The sleepy boy jumped slightly, turned his gaze towards the sound and tilted his head sideways slightly. He wasn't sure what was going on in there, but he didn't think he wanted to find out. After Naruto heard someone stomping on something in the room, the door opened again and revealed a shell-shocked looking boy who seemed to wince with every step he took. However, in an instant he forgot everything that just happened as that same sweet voice invited him back inside again. Quite content, he smacked his lips a few times and staggered back inside, still in his dreamy daze. Lying down next to the body the sweet voice belonged to, embracing it tightly before falling asleep again. A few hours later, Kumiko found herself being led towards the house of the 3 siblings and Naruto by her new sensei, Kakashi. When they arrived, her eyes grew wide as saucers as she saw the immensity of the building. They actually live here, she thought. She started slightly her sensei grasped one of her shoulders, and turned around to gaze up at him, her eyes still wide. His visible eye was drooping a bit as usual, but a small comforting smile was barely visible beneath his partial face mask. "Don't worry, okay," he said. Kumiko nodded and smiled half-heartedly. "Okay." They walked up to the large front door and knocked. Just as they were about to knock again, the door was swung open by a red-haired boy. Kumiko barely suppressed a shudder when the boy locked his black-rimmed eyes on her and asked, "What do you want?" In a deep drawl. "Well, he certainly doesn't have any social skills," she thought grumpily. Her sensei spoke up. "Is Naruto home? I will tell him to come down," the boy said. To Kumiko's amazement, the boy didn't move, he simply closed his eyes and what seemed to be like a small ball of sand flew behind him and then up the stairs. After a few seconds a boy suddenly screamed, "Gaara!" The red-haired boy seemed to be smiling for a brief moment before quickly squashing it back into the usual impassive gaze. "We will wait for him in the living room," he said simply as he turned his back on them, walked down the corridor, eventually swallowed by the shadows. Kumiko blinked several times, then turned and looked up at her sensei for some sort of explanation, but all she received was a puzzled shrug. Having no other choice than to follow the boy, They arrived in a spacious living room and seated themselves on the two sofas that stood there in the middle of the room. Kumiko sat down, somewhat gingerly, on the edge of the sofa. After discovering that she sat directly across Gaara, she unconsciously scooted away from him, since the way he was looking at her was slightly unnerving. She grasped the end of her long white hair and started twirling it around a finger. Something she always did when she was nervous about something. She squeaked and quickly let her hair go when Gaara spoke up. "Why are you doing that?" Oh, no reason," Kumiko said quickly and put her hands on her knees as she looked down at the floor. Just as Kakashi was about to say something, an angry Naruto interrupted him as he stomped inside the living room, hair covered by sand. "Gaara, you bastard, why did you do that? You could have called me like a normal person." The verbal lashing from the blonde boy didn't seem to faze Gaara at all, and he kept gazing blankly at nothing in particular. Seeing this, Naruto growled in annoyance and glanced across at the two visitors. Kakashi-sensei, what are you and Kumiko-san doing here?" He asked, slightly surprised at seeing the two of them in the house he shared with the three Sand siblings. The silver-haired Junin scratched the back of his head and chuckled rather sheepishly, which was never a good sign if you asked Naruto. Whenever his sensei did that, he was going to say something horribly unpleasant or needed to get something done for him. "Naruto, I need a favor," Kakashi said. Yep, he wanted something done all right. Kumiko, a muscle working in her cheek and eyes darting restlessly, glanced across at Naruto and started twirling her hair around her finger again. Kakashi cleared his throat and clapped his palms together in front of his face, the excessive cheeriness in his voice quite unnerving to the now wary Naruto. What could he have to ask that is so? "Kumiko needs to stay with you guys for a while." Naruto was speechless, and it was therefore up to Gaara to ask the obvious question, which he did in the same monotonous drawl. "Why?" "Well, she was living with me for a while, but she wanted to live somewhere else and we haven't been able to find appropriate housing anywhere else," Kakashi explained. "Why?" Gaara asked again. Because Kakashi-sensei is a pervert," Kumiko suddenly yelled, pointing her accusing finger at the older man, and then blushed at her sudden outburst. After this somewhat embarrassing revelation, the silver-haired Junin was happy his other female student wasn't here, who, unlike Naruto, would surely try to behead him. Gaara, who had maintained his stoic silence throughout this whole ordeal, gave Kumiko permission to live in their house until she could find a proper place of her own. She gratefully thanked the boy, whom she still found rather scary, and rose to take her leave and go to Kakashi's house to pack her things. The Junin, who was highly mortified, quickly followed. This couldn't be. He only wanted to eat a little bit before dinner. Where was it? Searching frantically, Naruto threw all the cabinets in the kitchen and found them all emptied of. "What the? Where's my ramen?" He almost broke down in tears then and there. Beef, pork, shrimp and miso, all his favorite flavors, gone. Over the past week he had painstakingly collected a large amount in one of the cabinets. In fact, it was to be his personal survival rations should a nuclear holocaust occur, so to speak. Who could have had committed this heinous act, this crime of all crimes? "Ah, I see you've noticed that your ramen is gone, Naruto-kun." That shrewd, yet so sweet and cute sand devil. He turned, crestfallen. "Temari-chan. My ramen, how could you?" He managed between desperate sobs. "No use in getting all upset, Naruto-kun. I hid it and I won't tell you where it is unless you do something for me," she said with an air of superiority and a smug look on her face as she leaned against the doorpost behind him with her arms folded in front of her chest. "So you didn't throw it away?" the blonde boy said, newfound hope lighting up his face. "Wait a minute, do something for you. What exactly?" he continued and narrowed his eyes at the sand nin. Temari smiled and walked up to him. "We're going shopping," she said brightly and pecked him on the cheek. As soon as she said shopping, Temari was sure she saw a hint of fear flash across Naruto's eyes before he quickly looked down. Why would he be afraid? Naruto quickly looked up again though and hid any internal emotions that he might have had under his usual broad grin. "Okay, but only if I get my ramen back." Fine. Temari conceded and dragged the ramen-addicted boy out of the house by his left arm. As she took in the scenery outside, Temari really was amazed by the radiance of Konoha in the autumn. The trees that lined the streets were a collection of vibrant shades of brown and yellow with a few leaves that stubbornly remained their original green color. The sky was dotted with heavy gray clouds that threatened to spill their watery contents on the earth below, and only now and again did a sunbeam manage to break through, creating a cone of golden light that lit up parts of the village. Earls were already flitting everywhere to find enough food and store it before the snow would finally begin to fall. Even the boy who was resisting the firm grasp she had of his arm couldn't spoil the beauty of it all. As they entered the busy shopping district of Konoha, Temari understood why she had seen the fear in those blue orbs. Every time she walked the streets with her two brothers, she received stares and the occasional insult, but it was nothing compared to what the boy who was now walking beside her received. The glares, the whispers behind their hands to their companions, and those eyes, always those cold eyes, looking sideways at Naruto. She saw him looking down at the ground dejectedly, the usual brightness in his blue skies shadowed as if a storm cloud had glitted over it, and she was sure he was trying hard to ignore the coldness projected towards him. She herself had to endure it all the time back in her own village, so she knew exactly what he was going through. But she couldn't understand why. Why would they treat the one that had single-handedly defeated her brother and the demon Shukaku and who had brought back one of their most prized geniuses like this? Looking around, she spotted a clothes store and was already halfway towards it when the owner suddenly stepped outside and put a closed sign on the outside of one of the windows. What the? Temari thought. Well, that might have been coincidence. Trying at the store that was next to it, its owner also repeated the action of his neighbor. This was an outrage. Closing the shop before the daughter of the late Kazekage had a chance to browse the goods. Stomping her foot indignantly, she was about to bash both their heads in when she felt a small tug on one of her arms. Naruto shook his head at her and grimacing slightly, he pointed at the end of the street where they would exit the busy part of the shopping district and enter a small area with second-hand stores. Temari had alpha mind to just go back to their house and ask Gaara to engulf the whole area with his sand-based ninjutsu, but decided against it. No reason to get him into more trouble. Raising her head proudly, he stalked towards where Naruto had pointed and ignored the reactions of the people that walked past them. When they finally reached the area, they were greeted by shops that could only be described as shabby. Okay, Naruto-kun, let's try some of these shops here, we both need some new clothes. Temari said, still slightly angry about the treatment they had both received a few moments earlier. What do we need new clothes for? Naruto mumbled, I just got a whole batch from Oba-chan. I know, but, Temari sighed, trailing off and fidgeting a little. She had just wanted to spend some time together with him, but she couldn't demand that he had to take her on a date, now could she? It was then that her gaze fell upon a small shop that barely stood out between all the others. It wasn't anything special, if anything it was even shabbier than the rest, but for some reason it also looked more inviting. Not wasting any time, Temari ignored Naruto's, but what? And dragged him inside through the front door of the little shop. Wow, was the first thing that Temari could think of when they stepped inside. The shop certainly seemed a lot bigger on the inside than it did on the outside. It was a little dusty and the various pieces of clothing were randomly and haphazardly strewn across a few tables or hung on several racks, but the overall effect was that it seemed a very comfy and welcoming establishment. When the two of them walked up to the counter with their footwear making soft tapping noises on the carpet floor, a woman appeared from behind a curtain that no doubt covered an exit towards a back room. She looked like she was in her 40s and had a round and wrinkled but friendly face. Her frizzy brown hair was tied into a single ponytail with a red ribbon and was Dr. Est in a simple brown sweatshirt and pants. Hello. Welcome to my shop, can I help you? She asked with a large smile. Temari, who was slightly taken aback by the woman, nodded. We're looking for some new clothes. The woman beamed. Yes, I'd imagine so. It's getting colder fast and I doubt that your current attire will be sufficient. Not that your current outfit isn't lovely, my dear. She quickly added. I've got the perfect thing for you, so why don't you follow me and then your brother can pick something out for himself. Naruto and Temari blushed. He's not my brother, ma'am. The slightly older girl explained. Oh, the friendly-looking woman clapped her hands in front of her mouth, as she quickly understood the relation between the two of them. I'm sorry, don't mind me. But let's get you your new outfit and maybe I can help him after we're done. The two women quickly went towards the back of the shop after the owner had dug up a variety of clothing and shoved Temari into the only dressing cabin, which left Naruto to try and find some new clothes on his own. Of course, he failed miserably and decided to wait until the shop owner and Temari were done so they could help him. When he was scrutinizing several sweaters a few minutes later, he heard someone speak up behind him. All done. He swiveled around and felt his jaw drop in amazement. Standing before him was Temari, wearing a black skin-tight top that ran up to her neck underneath a thigh-length beige woolen sweater with a braid pattern that fitted snugly around her figure. It also showed the top part of the top and her slender shoulders. She still wore the same black netted garment, but it now covered both of her calves and sported a pair of black skin-tight shorts that ended just above her knees. Heavy light brown boots, with warm woolen beige socks sticking out of them, covered her feet. Isn't she just lovely? The shop owner squealed, at which Naruto could only nod dumbly in agreement. Temari was inwardly very pleased she could have this effect on him and grinned. Did you find some clothes for yourself, Naruto-kun? When he shook his head, the shop owner and Temari quickly went to work and rummaged throughout the vast collection of clothing the shop had in stock. Knowing that the blonde boy had just received a large quantity of clothes from the 5th Hokage, Temari told the owner that he only had to pick out some sweaters for him. After they had looked through what seemed all the sweaters in the store, they had picked a slightly overlarge blue one which brought out the color of boy's eyes and a white woolen one which would undoubtedly keep him warm on even the coldest nights. Temari decided to continue wearing the outfit she had just put together with the owner and Naruto. Proceeded to pay for the several bags of other clothing she had picked out, the 2 sweaters for himself and a couple of matching blue scarves they had picked out together. Though slightly disgruntled, that his precious froggy wallet had been emptied by half, he quickly forgot about it when Temari kissed him and thanked him with a smile that reached up into her emerald eyes. When they left the store, the shop owner sighed wistfully at days gone by. She was there when Kyuubi had attacked Konoha but never held a grudge against Naruto, because in her mind there was simply no way that the boy, who seemed to light up whenever he saw the girl whom he was with, could be the demon itself. She sighed again and went to the back room to resume knitting her own clothes that she might never sell but was happy to make anyway. Rare customers like the ones she had today made it all worthwhile. After they were done with picking out new clothes and had dropped them at their home, Temari and Naruto had decided to take a stroll in one of the many small parks that Konoha had to offer. They were currently walking across a field, admiring the simple beauty of leaves being carried off by the wind and were holding hands as they every now and again bumped into each other slightly. You know, Naruto began, I'm glad we found that shop. Temari squeezed his hand a little tighter, laughing softly. Yeah, me too. The blonde boy cleared his throat nervously and scratched his nose with one of his thumbs. I kinda had fun, so maybe we could, do this again sometime. She was about to answer Naruto suddenly shoved her aside suddenly, causing her to tumble and fall on her behind. What was that for? She screamed. Any ideas of horrible retaliation were instantly squashed when she gasped at the sight that greeted her. A flurry of senbon was embedded in the boy's chest and it obviously hurt him immensely. Naruto stood panting, a furious expression on his face as he quickly pulled out the needles. The instant he was done extracting them he moaned in agony, clutching his arms around his midsection and dropping to the ground. What? This pain. What's happening? Feels like flames are shooting through my entire body. Like I'm about to be reduced to ash. Emerald green eyes widened in horror as she turned and caught sight of him, the pain etched across his strained features. Instinctively, Temari swiftly reached over her shoulder for her fan, but only grasped thin air. What? Where's my? Her voice caught tightly in her throat as she realized she'd left it at home. Well, I'm surprised he's still alive. A surprised voice snorted. Temari instinctively stiffened, scanning her surroundings carefully. Oh well, he'll die soon enough anyway. Who are you? Show yourself, she yelled furiously. What the hell did you do to Naruto? The voice laughed mockingly, and turning her head sharply in the direction of the voice, Temari caught sight of a man balanced on a tree branch that stood a short distance away. She blinked in shock. The man could only be described as a cross between a human and monkey. Arms that were too large swung stupidly at his side and he stood a bit hunched over. He had a large amount of black spiky hair on top and black facial hair framed his face. In the middle of it all was a nose with overly large nostrils. A flak jacket covered a black one-piece jumpsuit and revealed his rank as Chunin. It's too bad he took those poisons Senbon intended for you, it was all I had. The ape man scoffed. Oh well, he might have well taken them. He deserved it to have helped murderous traitors like you Sand Nin here in Konoha. He should therefore be punished accordingly. What? Temari spluttered. Why would a Chunin of all things attack them? The poison acts quickly. He'll die in less than a half hour. That'll give me time enough to beat you to death. The face sneered cruelly. His large hands raised as he cracked his knuckles. You traitors are going to pay for killing my best friend. Without giving her a chance to defend herself, the Chunin reached her at incredible speed. And had delivered a forceful punch to her face before she even had time to dodge, causing her to fly back several feet. She quickly raised herself to one knee, wiping her now bloody nose with the back of her hand. Temari knew she was in trouble. She might be an above-average genin but she relied on her fan for long and close-distance combat. What is it with you leaf bastards and revenge? She spat out and put on her very own patented battle face, psychotic bitch. I'm going to break every single bone in your body, you hairy freak. Crap, oh well, if I'm going to bluff, might as well do it properly. Maybe I could hold out until someone else sees the battle and intervene. Was the trail of thoughts running through her mind. She had absolutely no intention of dying today. Especially not when things were going so well lately. The so-called hairy freak laughed. The so-called hairy freak laughed. You've got guts, little girl, I'll give you that. We'll see how cocky you are when I beat it out of you. He said, and with that he flew at her once more. Punches and kicks followed one another in such rapid succession that Temari could only barely dodge them. Finally she saw an opening when she dodged a punch that went over her head. She moved forward slightly to give him an uppercut but received a knee in the chest instead. Temari grunted and leapt back swiftly, clutching her chest, her breathing slightly forced. Damn, this isn't going well. Where are the Anbu? Why haven't they sensed this fight yet? Are they really that incompetent? Well, that was pretty fun. Let's step up the pace a little, shall we? The Chunin launched himself swiftly from the stout tree branch he had jumped on, his fist flung before him. Ri's breath caught in her throat as she saw the shadow descending upon her, framed by the midday sun behind him. She quickly rolled to the side as the ape man impacted. What happened next, she could only describe as being slammed with several heavy mallets all over her body. She tried to deflect or block all the punches and kicks but just couldn't keep up. The man's speed surpassed her own. As the fight continued in the Chunin's favor, a certain boy was stirring. He looked up and saw Temari receive a knee in the stomach and a hard elbow in the back as she doubled over. When her face twisted in pain, Naruto felt like as if a vicious clawed hand was ripping his heart to shreds until all that remained were slivers of burning hatred. Hatred that wanted Naruto to cause as much pain as he could to the Chunin that was attacking them. Attacking Temari, he stood up gingerly and bared his teeth as he heard his girlfriend cry out. The boy's teeth clenched. He felt an anger swelling within him. A savage, primeval roar rumbled from somewhere deep inside him. The fury rose and grew. Suddenly, a raging hurricane of chakra started to swirl around him. It was then that the Chunin became aware of a strange chakra emanating from a source just beside him. He turned slightly and simultaneously leapt away from Temari, focusing on the boy, who as now surrounded by a rising tower of raging, swirling and deadly red chakra, his eyes widened. The man's voice became hoarse. What the? It's you. You're that monster. Gritting his teeth, he snarled and leapt further away from the girl, hurling every kunai and shuriken he possessed at Naruto. The red chakra that now encircled the boy seemed almost like a living thing, as all the weapons was swept away. Bounced backwards or simply destroyed under huge pressure. The blond boy raised his eyes slowly, focusing on the man. A powerful, almost maniacal glint shot across those glowing red orbs. Monster. Well, I guess I am in a way. The voice coming from Naruto was a growl, a tone that almost seemed unearthly. Naruto focused his blazing red slitted eyes on the now cowering man who, just minutes ago, was confident that he had killed the boy. Temari, on the other hand, felt the evil chakra wash over her, and a strange thought leapt into her mind. Was this why the Chunin had called Naruto a monster? What had happened to him? The man didn't even have time to blink before he felt the boy in front of him, grabbing his throat and right arm, so the Chunin was now being held in a vice-like grip. Even though he was a lot large, he was still pinned down on his knees by the smaller boy, and screamed in horror as he sensed the unbridled killer intent radiating from him. The evil, deep growling from the boy twisted into a menacing laugh. "You scream like a little girl." The grip tightened. "You worthless trash, you're going to pay for hurting Temari." Naruto grinned and licked his new-grown fangs. "Just die." Temari was still frozen, on one knee, her palms flat against the ground. Her heart was thundering against her chest, her eye widened in shock as she watched this. No. If he does what I think he's going to do. Naruto-kun, stop. Naruto froze as he heard the girl's desperate voice. Turning slightly, he focused his gaze on Temari, who was struggling to lift herself off the ground. Don't kill him. Why? He deserves to die. Naruto growled angrily. I know that, she whispered weakly, as she almost felt her knees give way. But you'll only get into trouble. Really, she had no problem with killing the man, but the way Naruto appeared now scared her, perhaps even more than how her brother once did. Moments ago he had been lying on the ground, dying, and yet here he was with strength that she had only sensed during his fight with Gaara. She jumped as a loud cracking noise filled the air. Wick! Was quickly followed by an anguished scream. She felt her breath catch in her throat again as she saw what had just happened. Naruto had grabbed both of the Chunin's arms and snapped them like mere twigs. He then dropped him, and the girl had a glimpse of the absolute terror in the Chunin's eyes, the rippling waves of pain and agony. Naruto stepped back, tossing a scornful gaze at the defeated, anguished man. That low, terrible growl again rumbled from Naruto's throat. Go. Get out of here. She just saved your life, remember that. Her eyes widening in horror at what she just saw, at the incredible, powerful waves of chakra that was still washing over her, she watched the man rise, amble away awkwardly, the pain still shooting throughout his bruised body. The girl turned shocked, slightly fearful blue eyes to the boy. Naruto-kun. What are you? A weak whisper. Temari immediately saw this was the wrong thing to say. The red eyes transformed back into sky blue and were filled with fear. Fright turned to confusion as she saw this. Naruto's breathing deepened, coming out in rasping, hoarse breaths. I can't tell her, I just can't. She'll hate me just like everyone else. The boy took a small step backwards. Temari's brows knitted together, and she took a step towards him, stretching one of her arms towards him. Naruto-kun, what's wrong? No, I can't tell her. She'll hate me. I can't risk this, not after I found someone so special. The frightened boy took another step backwards. Temari stared in shock as he turned around swiftly, and before she could blink, he was already running out of the park towards the forest that surrounded Konoha. Wait, where are you going? Temari shouted, almost panicking after his retreating back. Why did he run away? What was that weird red chakra? What's wrong with him? She set off after the fast retreating figure at a run. Only one way to find out the answers. 1. San suffix. Naruto calls her Kumiko-san because he doesn't know her that well, and therefore Chan would be a bit presumptuous. Well, that's it, I'll be going now. Bye. A silver high, red man said before he quickly disappeared in a small cloud of smoke. Wah, hey, Kakashi-sensei, wait, a girl with very long white hair yelled indignantly. Damn it, now who is going to help me carry all these things inside? While Sakura had been rather tactlessly revealing certain information to Hinata, Kakashi and Kumiko had gathered her things at his own apartment. She had never expected it would take so long to pack all of her new belongings, and so she and her sensei had taken an extra day to make sure everything could be taken to her new house in one go. Her mood took a nosedive as she remembered her horrible escape from her former village, forced to leave everything behind. Leaving her family behind on the perilous journey to Konoha as they were slaughtered one after the other. The screams, the cries for mercy, the cries from the wounded who were reaching out to those fleeing past, babies, children bathed in their own blood. These would never, ever leave her. Killed. Everyone was killed. By those bastards. She thought angrily and sniffed once. She wasn't going to allow herself to cry. That wouldn't bring anyone back or make her feel any better. She could only revenge her clan and exact horrible justice on the ones responsible. Hey, what are you shouting about and what are you doing here with all those damn bags? Someone suddenly shouted and caused her to look up. My name is Makajuki Kumiko. Pleased to meet you, she said and bowed towards a boy with weird face paint. I'll be living here from now, until I find my own place. The boy puffed himself up and scrunched up his face, and if it wasn't for the paint covering it, it would have probably looked as if his head was threatening to explode. What? Another one of you brats coming to live here? He roared in outrage. I've had it. Damn all you little brats to hell. Kumiko stood open-mouthed as she watched him turn on his heels angrily and stomp back inside the large house, slamming the heavy oak doors as he went through the front entrance. Wow, what crawled up his butt and died? Slightly miffed about the fact that the boy didn't even help her carry her things, she sighed and started to do it herself. Well, it looks like staying here is going to be interesting to say the least. To be continued. And thanks.